What is Kenshi? I talk about it a lot in my videos, but that doesn't exactly explain it. Well, Kenshi is a game about survival, about starting from a place where you are less than nothing, and then slowly and painfully earning friends, making money, and acquiring power, until your fortresses dwarf the capitals of all the nations of the world, and no one can hope to best you in single combat. And not because you're the chosen one, or some sort of super special guy that gets super special powers. No, underneath it all, you are still a worthless nobody, but you did this all out of sheer determination and spite for the uncaring world. Okay, but what kind of a game is Kenshi? Well, it's a game that from the outset is a hardcore open world RPG with some other elements of other games mixed in, and before you roll your eyes, this is more in the vein of Morrowind than it is in modern Far Cry or a typical Ubisoft game, but that is an oversimplification. In Kenshi, you will be beaten within an inch of your life by the lowliest of enemies, and you will only be spared because even they think that you're not worth the extra effort to finish off. You will travel through jungles filled with endless acid rain that strips the skin off your flesh, only to find one or two of the artifact that you need like 20 of to get the next thing you need. You will cross deserts that seem pretty okay at first, but then, oh god, there are giant death lasers coming from the sky. Run! They can wipe your squad in a single second, by the way. And these are just the easy to intermediate regions in Kenshi. Kenshi is the kind of game where a mod to add crucifixion is something that's totally plausible in world, and if anything, it's fairly mild compared to some of the other stuff that can happen to your in-game characters. Hello everyone, welcome to day 1000 and something or other of my personal lockdown. Remember when all of this was new and scary? Well, it is still kind of scary, I guess. At least rich people aren't demanding I put excess strain on my personal budget anymore to prop up the economy while they hold up in their fortresses of, oh, goddammit. Fine. You know what is still the only thing keeping me sane since all this lockdown and economic downturn inflation hell spiral business started? Kenshi. So, previously in the last video, I was well over 100 hours deep into my playthrough of Kenshi, which is frankly, baby stuff. I think there are some people out there that have 5-figure times in Kenshi. There was a lot of stuff that we still needed to do in order to make sure that Beep is recognized as the strongest warrior. Together, we started out as barely strong enough to not get robbed every time we went outside of town, to toppling nations, discovering long-lost technology, and liberating the enslaved masses of the continent. We had dismantled the Holy Nation, one of the strongest factions in the game, and we were going to start our campaign against the United Cities where we last left off while getting ready for the biggest fight of the game, and crap. The save file's gone. I think I forgot to back it up when I formatted my PC a while back. Well, time to go on another big Kenshi adventure, baby! Welcome to Kenshi! You spawn in as a nobody with 1s out of 100 in all of their stats and barely enough money to afford a crust of bread. Even the faction known as the Starving Bandits, herein referred to as the Hungry Boys, whose whole shtick is they're a bunch of dudes so impoverished and literally starving that they rove around in massive swarms begging for food, are tougher than you on an individual level. And they travel in packs, like big packs. You start out in a place called the Hub that used to be the hub of something, but after a war between two major factions on the continent, the place got trashed so badly that neither side really wanted to or even had the resources to hold it, and well, look at it. Would you want to own a place like this? Back to you though. You are a sad, miserable little guy, and everyone can beat you up. For fun. First rule of early Kenshi. Don't buy more food than your character presently needs, because the Hungry Boys will run up on you, kick your teeth in, and take all your food. Because Kenshi is a game where looting down characters is a two-way street. Dudes will also steal your high-end gear if you let them, so even in the later game, don't go down in a place where you can't get carried away by someone that cares about you. The Dust Bandits, who are the most poorly equipped hostile faction in the game that are not considered impoverished, okay, impoverished is a relative term here, they outmatch you. Heck, you couldn't even take on a single Dust Bandit right now. Encounter a slaver group? Well, hippity hoppity, you're about to be someone else's property. That's indeed something that can happen in Kenshi. Never mind the guards of any major towns, the organized patrols, or even the packs of wild animals. You are the bottom of the food chain. This isn't your typical RPG where you are birthed from the great sewers of character creation, and then you are immediately granted an audience with Lord Bungle von Crumglington because the guards think you're a special guy for whatever reason. You will not collect 10 beak thing noses to show that you're making making Lord Krunglington's land safer, and you will not be rewarded with a +2 that Harness of Death, which will be your main gear for the early game. There are no quests, there are no sets of stat enhancing gear, and there is exactly one way of getting tougher and stronger in Kenshi. You get the shit kicked out of you. I'm not kidding. The stat that determines how much damage you can resist and how much you can take before going down is called toughness, and the main way to level it up is to get beaten up again, and again, and again. There's also toughness bonuses for getting back up when a character is playing dead when a fight's going bad, or saying something that results in you getting beaten up in a public setting, but there is no way to get through Kenshi without taking a lot of abuse. Lucky for you, the world is not a safe place at all. The area you spawn in is known as the Border Zone, and it's possibly one of the safest ones in-game with its near-constant dust storms, swarms of hungry boys, and rabid bone dogs. There's really no available food. That last bit there was no available food is pretty important, because anywhere that there is food, there are people that want the food, and they usually don't ask. Dust storms are the most benign of all the weather phenomena you're going to encounter, because everywhere else there's acid rain, poison gas, ground being so messed up that you sink into it and it's acidic in nature, so it just melts you. And also beak things. Let me tell you about the beak things. Beak things are essentially murder giraffes. Not like this little guy here, but like if Satan was in charge of making the Brontosaurus. They have absurd attack reach with their long necks, do a crap ton of cutting damage with their beaks, oh yeah, and they might eat you alive. Another fun and exciting thing in the world of Kenshi is that everyone needs to survive, including the animals and the cannibals. Bone dogs will try to eat stray goats or maybe even limbs that get cut off in the middle of a fight. If you're feeling brave, the hivers have a diet of fish and occasionally some human teeth as a treat. I don't know where they get the teeth. The beak things have a diet of you. When a beak thing downs one of your characters, they get straight to munchin', and if a limb runs out of hit points while they're having a little snackety snack, that limb is gone. They ate the whole thing. Lucky for you, beak things aren't gluttonous, and once they're full, they'll wander off, and maybe if you're lucky, you'll be able to crawl somewhere where you can get medical assistance. That is, if the other beak things don't find you first. Beak things are everywhere, and they travel in packs. So here we are in an extremely hostile world with some rags on our back and a rusty metal stick. The first thing I notice is that I have no food and my hunger is already dropping. This is bad, especially since once you start starving, you can and will have debuffs that make your stats go into the negatives. There's no real food readily available to us since we're broke. At least food that won't kick the crap out of us if we try to eat it. Plus, we have no way to cook our own food yet. We need to make some money. Right now, money is our only way of getting food or stuff that's worth using. You can go and explore the Shek ruins nearby or scrounge up some very basic weapons left behind which are bottom tier quality, but the risk isn't worth it. This isn't our first rodeo though, and we know what to do here. Time to hit the rocks and strip them for copper. Ore mining is most likely the only thing you can do consistently to make money, as you are not nearly tough enough for bounty hunting or anything of the sort. Mining is great because you can sell iron and copper for a decent amount of cats in the early game, but you also get to train your strength, since the more encumbered you are, the faster you train. You move pretty slow though, so be careful. After a few trips of mining that rock, we've got enough money to afford some food, so now we can get robbed. There you are, just hacking away at that copper node with acceleration turned on, and then in the span of a single second, the hungry boys roll up, beat the tar out of you, and steal all that food you just bought. But hey, at least your toughness leveled up. So after like 6 hours of this, which will be constant pain, you'll eventually have enough money to buy some actual clothing, a weapon, and maybe even recruit a friend or two. Maybe you'll even feel ready to start exploring the world around you. Here's a hot tip. If you have even the slightest doubt about whether or not you're ready to strike out into the world, you're probably not ready. The swamps, not a nice place. The ruins to the south of Shek territory, not a nice place. The Holy Nation to the north? Actually, it's okay if you're exclusively human and male, but if not, that's gonna be a problem. Vane? It's okay, but there are a lot of beak things there, so be careful if you value your limbs. In between cautious outings that usually ended in one of my new friends carrying the others home, I started doing something I probably should have done much earlier in my old playthrough. Buying property. Yep, you can live the millennial fantasy in Kenshi and have real estate, because it's dirt cheap in the hub. You just have to rebuild whatever you buy. Buying property within a friendly city's borders is a great stopgap between the early game of being out on your own and the mid game of establishing your own, holdfast. If you have your own place in town, you don't have to pay for a bed when you you need rest or to heal, and you also have the option to build a stove and start cooking. If you have your food at home, it becomes a lot easier to start saving money for research artifacts and buying real armor. You can also set up a cute little science table and start learning the basics of building things for your future base. It's a lot safer than trying to set up a little shack out in the middle of nowhere with no technology to build stuff like, walls, and then try to learn how to build walls as dudes are invading your home. This isn't a perfect solution, as there are certain things that must be built outside to function, and you're not allowed to do that in the city, so you're gonna have to strike out on your own eventually. The biggest leap you'll make in Kenshi is starting your own settlement. I used to say that the best rule of thumb for if you're ready to build a settlement is that if you have the slightest doubt that you are ready to put down roots, you need another, 6 to 8 hours. But now I can say that there are steps you can take to be sure about setting up a base. So long as you bought even the cheapest little house anywhere, you can set up a science table and go as far as completing most of the early game tech you'll need to build a proper base from the safety of a walled city that has guards that you don't need to pay or take care of. Lucky for you, the bar at the hub conveniently sells books, which you need to start researching things, and if they don't have them there, they've got the cities of Stack in the Holy Nation or Squin in the Shet Kingdom, which are a short walk away. Just remember, if you're gonna go to Stack, that's Holy Nation territory, so unless you like the idea of being enslaved by the guards, don't be anything other than a human. I got as far as midway through tech level 3 after buying the adjacent house to mine, since high level tech benches have larger dimensions to them, and those don't fit inside little shacks, and all you really need are the basic defenses, like walls level 2 and some crossbows, and optionally some engineering tech that lets you make the bug houses, and all of that can be learned with low tier science that doesn't require anything more than basic books and maybe a few crafting materials, all things you can easily buy in nearby towns. Now comes time for the great journey. I gather up all the new friends I've made, and we strike out to... well, we just gotta wander around for a while, really. There's a lot that can go into picking a spot for your new home, such as taking into account whose territory you're building on and what they're going to want from you, how close to bandit bases you are, what kind of natural resources are available in the area, how fertile is the land, and all sorts of stuff like that. I gotta be honest though, I don't bother with 90% of that or using the prospector mode in game. I just open up the build menu and move around a stone mine until I get over 90% stone availability. Everything else can be dealt with eventually using science or good old-fashioned violence, but access to stone is especially important when you're starting out because it's what you make building material out of. And without building material, you have no shelter or walls. And without those things, you're just a bunch of goobers asking to be robbed and then beaten to death by the hungry boys. I picked this cool spot at a foot in a mountain, and New Fullerton is founded. We shall avenge our fallen sister city of Anaheim. Welcome to New Fullerton. We have some beds, a building to research stuff in, and walls. Everybody wants our shit now. We spent hours upon hours being at the bottom of the food chain, desperately fighting for some food and temporary lodgings, and after saving up our resources and doing our research, we are now slightly above the bottom of the food chain. We now have our own place to make basic things like metal plates and electronic parts. We went and got a pack animal so that we can sell our basic goods for food, and we're even working on our own food production. So of course, literally anyone a day's walk from our location is now going to try and take it from us. Time to get raided. Did you really think that you're in an area where you're not going to get raided? You are wrong. Literally everywhere in the map is within the territory of some bandit group or entity that's trying to kick down your doors and take all your stuff after beating everyone in your homestead to a pulp. Some factions will even kidnap your dudes for Okron knows what. My raids came from several people because one of the downsides of being in the border zone or near it is that there's not much law enforcement going on here, so we got a bunch of raider gangs. We got the Hungry Boys, the Death Bandits, the Black Dragon Ninjas, the Berserkers, who are a rogue faction of the Shet Kingdom, and the Hive Traders, but those guys are usually cool. Raids are simple enough. Usually you'll get a notification that someone's on their way to break into your house, which is actually rather polite of them. When they get to your house, they'll usually have some sort of demand where the camera will cut to the leader of the raid making some sort of announcement, which is usually to demand a payoff. You are expected to stab them. Then whoever's at your door bum rushes your gate, and you gotta pray your turrets are good enough, or at least passable enough, to weaken the invading forces to the point that when they finally break down your gate and bum rush you, the people living inside stand a chance. It is actually a very real possibility that not only will the invaders overcome your defenses and beat everyone up, but that you can straight up lose your base in Kenshi, as in the invaders completely defeat everyone inside the base, and then they'll start carrying your dudes and tossing them out in front of the gates, and then they just start going about their business as if it's their own base, because while it is still yours on paper and in the menu, it's functionally the bandits' base now. They go about sleeping in your beds, using your training facilities, and you can't do squat about it until you raise an army to get your base back. Luckily, we've got some pretty decent walls on our base to keep the bandits and ninjas out. But just you wait. There's more pain to be had. You see, there are these larger, much better equipped and more organized factions that will show up on a regular basis and demand some sort of tribute for you, or else they just destroy you. They're called local governments, and they're here to collect taxes. Depending on where you put down roots, you'll have to answer to either the United Cities, the Czech Kingdom, or the Holy Nation. The United Cities is straightforward enough and just want some cash. The representatives of the Czech Kingdom value your food supplies over your money, as I don't know if you've looked around their territory, but it's not exactly ideal for farming. You can also get out of paying your snack tribute by just taking all of your food stores and moving it into the inventories of all your characters. But once you're in the late game, that's more trouble than it's worth, as your food production will most likely outstrip what both you and the Czech government can eat. The Holy Nation wants you to participate in Prayer Day. Prayer Day sounds pretty good at first. All you have to do is open up your gates to the Priest of Okron, who will lead your settlement in prayer once a week. What they don't tell you is that this is actually a plot to see if your settlement has any unsupervised women or minorities living in it. The Holy Nation doesn't like those. This phrasing is most likely going to get my ass demonetized, so patreon.com/charlatanwonder if you like what I do. If the Holy Nation representatives see a single non-human, non-male answer the door or going about their business inside of your base, it is on. You've got like maybe a day and a half before they show up with an inquisitorial extermination force. You could try hiding your people they don't like out of their sight, but the whole thing is enough for me to just not build on Holy Nation turf until I've burned down their last city. There are actually a scant few areas in No Man's Land where you won't have to worry about any of the three major factions bothering you, but these lands often have their own problems, like endless swarms of cannibals and bandits because of the lack of organized policing, or they're so hard to get to that you have to babysit and micro your away teams coming home if you want them to actually make it to the gates. Finally, in the parade of people kicking down our doors, we have the traveling merchants, like the hivers I mentioned earlier. Depending on where you are, they're either going to be from the Western Hive or the United Cities. It's pretty nice to have someone that actually wants to give us something in exchange for our money or stuff for once. Traveling merchants are also the easiest way to get your hands on pack animals, because otherwise it's usually a pretty long trip to get to an animal market. They're also good for picking up ration packs, one of the highest nutrition food items in the game, as most general goods merchants will have at least one stack of them in their supplies, so it's often good to try and time your expeditions to whenever the merchant comes around. Between the constant barrages of goons and traders at your gates, there are two primary concerns that you need to address. You need food, you need defenses. Food is easy enough, asterisk. All you gotta do is put stuff in the ground and keep it wet until it's ready to harvest. Buy just enough crop resources for a single small plot, save the first few yields and reinvest them to upgrade your land into larger plots, and eventually you will have multiple XL plots of a single agricultural crop. Boom! You have figured out agrarian society. A word of advice though, if you're in a dry area, grow cactus. If you're in a wet area, grow green fruit. Just about anywhere that isn't toxic waste sewage ground will be able to grow wheat straw. I always forget about this, and it ends up severely slowing me down on my path to food independence. While we're waiting for your crops to get up to snuff, we just keep that building material machine and the mines a-going. Low-end goods are usually more than enough to keep your base fed and will earn you enough Catan credits left over after buying food for something else that is very important: hiring mercenaries. The best way to keep your base safe while you're still working on basic defenses is to hire out some mercs. There's no limit on how many companies you can hire at any given time, and it's surprisingly cheap for what you get. I got a whole company of mercs that hang out at the bar in the hub for 1,000 cats a day to guard my base, which is a steal and pretty easy to make just by selling building material and sheets of iron. Short of an organized attack from a major faction, a full company of mercenaries is more than enough to keep your base completely protected, and as a bonus, you can let your own guys join in the fray whenever you're under attack by bandits or whoever, so that they can safely get combat experience, which safe is admittedly a relative word here, but losing a limb just builds character. Plus you get a cool cyborg limb and are labeled a heretic by the Holy Nation because you have prosthesis. The second and more important thing you should do to keep your home safe is always test your walls. Always make sure that your gate is in a concave shape to avoid friendly fire incidents at the turrets, and make sure that there aren't any gaps in your base's walls by shutting your gates and directing a character outside of your base to get in. Sometimes, if something's at too sharp of an angle or just not quite right, players are actually able to move through small gaps. Or, in my case, I found out the hard way that some mountains don't actually have collision by having a horde of black dragon ninjas run around my walls and right into the middle of my base. Walls can be really tricky at times, and I've spent more time than I'd like to admit wrestling with the building editor to get them just how I like, which is not letting people in that want to kill my dudes. So after a minute of building up the base and kickstarting our economy enough to where we can consistently produce enough crap to hawk in other towns to afford some basic gear, I say it's time we explore. Don't worry about the guys you leave behind. As long as they keep producing enough stuff to afford to keep rehiring the mercenaries, they should be good. And also, most of the time, you don't have to worry about the mercenaries wandering off because they're courteous enough to find the nearest person after the contract's expired and be like, hey bruh, you wanna re-up? So we should be good. We've got a world to see. Well, that looked pretty bad, but they'll walk it off. The world of Kenshi is a huge place with lots to see and lots of people to meet. And if we're gonna thrive in this unforgiving hellhole of a continent, we're gonna need lots of cool stuff and lots of new friends. We've checked out a few towns already, like the Hub, Squin, and even the Shek capital of Admag further to the south. But if we really want to make some new friends, we're gonna have to really explore. The easiest way to get going with this is to buy some maps. Most major cities have a store with a little backpack guy on the sign where you can buy backpacks among other things that you'll need to survive on the road, like med kits, rations, and maps. Most of the maps you can get in stores are pretty cheap and will tell you where basic settlements and major cities are, which is exactly what we need. We can start small, maybe check out the swamps. I hear that there's a lot of really cool stuff hidden in the swamp villages, and we can make a lot of money on... Okay, never mind, the swamps are a bad place, let's go somewhere else. Instead, let's head north to Vane, where we can check out the Hyper villages where you can buy the finest of totally legit robotic limbs. While we can't find too many new friends in the Hyper cities, as all these little guys are under the thrall of the Hive Queen, it's a good place to sell stuff and get ready to go deeper into the unknown. There's this crazy place to the north of Hyver territory called the Foglands, and there's a hidden city in there called Mongrel. They say that some of the best fighters around can be found living in Mongrel, and that it's not too hard to get there once you're in the Foglands, but getting out is a real challenge. Mongrel itself is pretty well defended by those who live there, but once you're out, it's your problem to deal with the Fogmen. The Fogmen are basically Hivers that try to kidnap you and perform some sort of ritual. Fogmen don't sound too bad, right? Wrong. There's a shitload of them. Even if they're weak, it's hard to even get into the Foglands proper if you happen to approach at the wrong time and catch one of their Outrider patrols, because sure, even our squad of relative rookies can dispatch low-level Hive drones, it's just that by the time we're done mowing down the 30 of them there are, a whole new batch of Fogmen will show up and we're just gonna get worn down into nothing. We had a bit of a bad time where we all got dragged off and found out the hard way just what the Fogmen want to do to you once they kidnap you, but that's okay because we made it to Mongrel after a bit of save scumming. Welcome to Mongrel. You'll notice that as you enter the city, it is entirely powered by corpse furnaces. The Fogmen are constantly sending wave after wave of guys at the city gates, and the guards take them down with so many bodies piling up that they need an efficient way to dispose of them all. And also, you know what? The corpse furnace does generate power, so why not? The inside of the city is relatively safe, but you never know if the guards are gonna miss a Fogman or 12 through the gates. I'm pretty sure this town has the most unique recruits out of anywhere in the game. You can get stuff here that other cities don't have, like a full-blown robotics shop, which are usually reserved for tech hunter outposts or maybe the United Cities, and 3 whole bars. But back to those unique recruits. We want to get all the cool dudes in our squad so that people will think that we're cool dudes too, because that is exactly how that works. Why have a personality when you can just be surrounded by people that do that for you? First up is Crumble John. His special ability is that he is an old man. He's all sad and bent over no matter what you do or what you have him carry, but he's nice to have around and has fun stories to tell. Then we've got Infinite Wingwang. Getting a guy with this cool of a name is gonna cost you 100,000 cats. However, if you're a shrewd negotiator, you can get him down to 5 grand. What do you get for all your money? Well, he's got some pretty solid stats and some of the highest weapon skills of a character in-game like to start out. Also, his name is Infinite Winwang. There's also a few other randos you can find here, but there's one more varied character we're going to meet, Beep. You don't seek out Beep. Beep finds you. Beep costs nothing to recruit because you're not actually recruiting him. Beep is recruiting you. Beep says the word beep a lot because God knew that if he gave him more words, he'd be too powerful. This is no longer our adventure. This is Beep's quest for ultimate power. Beep, like a lot of other characters, starts with literally 1 in all his stats and is a hive drone, which pretty much gives him the worst base stats possible. He only has a rag loincloth and a bandage to his name, but he will surpass all those who challenge him. Beep is indeed the strongest warrior, as he will often say after a fight. The entire world just hasn't realized it yet. One last thing before we move on. This is a relatively small slice of exploring the world of Kenshi, but we've covered a lot of ground. You see that little bitty model city way out in the horizon? Pretty cool that Kenshi will model cities for you literal miles off in the distance, so that if you really wanted to for some reason, you could theoretically travel without looking at a map, just go by the landmarks. Without mods, Kenshi has a maximum draw distance of 12 kilometers, which I believe is like double the max draw distance of PlanetSide 2 last time I checked. You know, PlanetSide 2, the big open world combined arms game this channel used to be centered around for a while in the before times. And you want to know the craziest thing of all? That's not a pre-made settlement. That's actually our base, way out in the distance. One of the most amazing things about Kenshi is that not only are you able to put yourself on the map metaphorically, but you can quite literally leave your mark on the world. New Fullerton grows. Now that we are blessed with the presence of Beep, nothing shall stop us on our path to becoming a great city. We've been doing a whole lot of science lately to make New Fullerton bigger, better, and produce cooler stuff like high-end katanas and revolving barrel harpoon cannons that can remove all of a person's limbs inside of a second. But to do all that, we need science resources. I talked a bit about science early on, but I'll go into detail now. Kenshi, on top of being a huge open-world RPG/RTS/world simulation, also has a full-blown tech tree that requires many hours of researching and finding materials to complete. It's actually completely optional, just like building a settlement is, and you can get by through the entire game without ever doing any research. But we're in it to win it. Science is done by first collecting up scientific documents like books or engineering documents or AI cores, and then expending them at a research bench to be able to learn about everything from how to put seeds in the ground and make food come out, to high-end cybernetic limb replacements. How fast you can research these things depends on the science skill of the person at the research bench, and I think what level of research bench you have too. I don't know if there's a bonus multiplier or not, but the wiki probably knows. The good news is that the most basic tier research item, a simple book, is one of the most abundantly available items in major cities. Come to think of it, the bar at the hub not only has books in stock, but also carries a lot of the secondary items you'll need for early game research. How convenient. The bad news is that we've exhausted all research projects that can be done off basic books, and it's time to start exploring the world for ancient science books, engineering blueprints, and even the fabled AI cores. It's not all bad though. There are, as far as I know, 2 stores that stock advanced research items, but once you buy them, they don't replenish. I'm not telling you because half the adventure is finding these places on your own. Just kidding. I looked it up on the wiki myself, so that wouldn't be fair. The places where you can buy advanced research items are the Tech Shop in Flats Dragoon and the building on the far side of Black Desert City. The latter is also one of the only places where you can find blueprints for the endgame weapon, the Falling Sun. Lucky for us, New Fullerton grows. We've gone from hawking off extra raw materials to afford food and protection to manufacturing weapons and electronics for export with our own designated trade caravan. Food, money, and safety are no longer immediate problems. In fact, despite being a collapsed civilization, the world of Kenshi has a fairly solid banking system. I can sell off weapons, circuit boards, and other parts to cities in the Shek Kingdom and immediately have access to those funds anywhere else in the world. That means that we are more than good to start exploring the world for science. We're going to all the places that aren't readily available on purchase maps where the bones of an ancient civilization are waiting for us to dig them up. With the base taking care of itself, we're free to really explore the world. Previously, we had merely gone to major settlements and cities, places that we could easily find just by buying a map at the store. Now we're going to really start seeing the world. We're going to explore every nook and cranny of the map, looking for ancient science books to fuel our tech. You are able to buy a small handful of locations where ancient science might be hiding at the adventurer store, which are sold as treasure maps, which will get you started. But if we want to find the rest, we'll have to scour all those places looking for more maps in the form of shipping manifests, ancient military documents, and others of the like, which give us the location of other ruins where we can find more science, or maybe even some rare gear. There are some places that just aren't revealed any other way than happening upon them, such as the secret goat society, which keeps their location well hidden. A lot of these places are going to have tough enemies guarding them, like the iron spiders. They can do a spin attack, which removes everyone's limbs around them, and the guardian skeletons, who refuse to abandon their posts long after their empire fell, or other things that have taken up residence in the ruins since the Second Empire fell. Along the way, we're gonna find some pretty wild stuff. There's the Ashlands, the Gurglers, the Secret Crab City, and Venge, a horrible place where lasers come out of the sky. Don't go to Venge. There's a lot of ancient libraries where we can get a few ancient science books, as well as old barracks and weapons depots where we can get some good gear that we can't quite make yet. But what we really want are the ancient labs. A single ancient lab can yield a shitload of science on top of all the medical and crafting items inside, as well as a bunch of stuff that's pretty much just trinkets to sell to vendors like ancient skeleton CPUs. There's always more than enough to pay for whatever expensive you've incurred during your trip and finance the next trip while you're at it. Ancient labs are big science and big money, but they're also crawling with iron spiders and worse. Even with a full squad and the most careful of planning, we can barely handle taking on the iron spiders one at a time, and we have to set up medical camps nearby to recover between fights. Also, always remember that iron spiders are like animals. You have to loot them as soon as they're down and remove some of their innards for them to be truly dead. Otherwise, they just get back up while you're still recovering from your previous wounds. So how's the base doing? Nice. Let's keep going. A fringe benefit of going off the beaten path where no one has lived in centuries is that that's where you find the coolest people to recruit, like Burn. Burn is one of the few skeletons of the world that not only lived beyond the confines of the Ashlands, but also hasn't reset their memory. They were there for everything that went down in the previous two empires, and they can tell you about it. So ancient science books and engineering plans are great, but what we need if we really want to go far are the AI cores. AI cores are the rarest items in the game. You'll find maybe one or two if you're lucky in a single abandoned lab, but sometimes you'll find that there aren't any at all. AI cores are what you need to research the big stuff that makes life really easy, such as hydroponic farming, which lets you ignore the soil conditions of your settlement and let you grow whatever you want, or those 6-barrel revolving harpoon guns. Shame that we're gonna have to go to the far corners of the continent to find them. Believe it or not, AI cores are actually a renewable resource outside of the science labs. They just drop off one of the single toughest enemies in the game in an area that we are nowhere near ready for. And ironically, by the time you get there, you'll most likely be done with the tech tree anyway. So, during this, big quest for science, we made a little loopsy-whoopsie, a fucky-wucky, if you will. You see, we saw on our map that there was an ancient lab nearby the river bordering the Holy Nation's territory, so we decided to head over and have a look. The problem is, we didn't notice that the lab was not only in Holy Nation territory, but smack in the middle of an area called Rebirth, the Holy Nation's labor camp where they reform, big quotes there, all the women who disobey them and all the other people that weren't born as Greenlander males through the act of hard, endless, body-destroying labor. We were just passing through, but the guards at Rebirth just couldn't stand that we were traveling with Shek, hivers, and skeletons like they were people with their own rights and desires, and they attacked us, unprovoked, totally unprovoked. So we thought, what the hell, let's start a slave revolt and break some chains. It'll be fun. And we had a great time kicking the crap out of Holy Nation guards and stuffing them into their own cages. We even made some new friends along the way who wanted to travel with us after we released them. That was fun and all, but we are now officially enemies of the state according to the Holy Nation for the high crime of not liking slavery and believing that everyone is equal. Also killing a ton of their guards and stuffing the few survivors in the cages, which was essentially leaving them to die. This this is kind of bad because now we have an enemy that can legitimately threaten us. The Holy Nation isn't a group of bandits or a ninja clan. They have well-trained soldiers who have high-quality gear, and they're gonna throw a lot of them at our base. Between our little romp and rebirth and eventually heading home, the Holy Nation assaulted New Fullerton 4 times, and things started getting so rough that our exploration team had to end the expedition early to help with defending the walls because we were running out of mercenaries that still had all their limbs attached. And yeah, we gotta switch priorities. Like, there's not much we can do until we deal with this. So we started a little itsy-bitsy slave revolt in the Holy Nation, and now they don't like us. They've declared war on us. Those first 4 attacks were nothing. They just keep coming at us. Like, man, all we wanted was some science. All you guys had to do was not try to attack and enslave us as we passed through your territory, and none of this would have happened. How hard is it to not do slavery? Do not say anything if you play RimWorld. We'll get to that game sooner or later, by the way. Just, I got a few others we gotta get to first. For now, we have a change in priorities because we're at war. The search for science is still important, but now we need to focus on things like not getting overrun by hordes of well-armed religious zealots. Thank goodness we built those turrets and kept the mercs on payroll. We're gonna take this fight to the Holy Nation sooner or later, but for now, we need to take care of New Fullerton. So yeah, back to those regular attacks. The Holy Nation is sending large forces to try to break down our gates about every 3 days or so, and each time it's a pretty hard fight. We also need to contend with the incredibly tough enemy that is the Snap 2 system of Kenshi's build mode to really expand out those walls. We already had a couple towers built before because in Kenshi, ranged attacks not only take line of sight into account, but also elevation advantage, and the higher you are, the better shot you have. But now, we're building an entirely new annex for the base for the purpose of making another set of towers so that we can really shoot down those paladins coming at us. We're adding additional gates too and redundant layers of security so that we have every chance we can against the Holy Nation because Okran knows. We need it. Sometimes they'll just assemble an insane amount of dudes just outside of New Fullerton and stare at us menacingly for like a few hours and then they'll just leave. I'd like to say that it's because they know if they get within range of the towers, it's over for them, but I also really don't want them to try. The Holy Nation isn't the only problem we have too. So just because the Holy Nation is raining down soldiers on us does not mean that everyone else has politely stopped what they're doing to give us some breathing room. In fact, it would seem that some of the bandit factions are actively taking advantage of how we're up against the wall with the Holy Nation to try and hit us while we're weak. They haven't been able to breach the walls just yet, but man, there have been some close calls. I don't know if they're coordinating this, but the Dust Bandits seem to wait for just a little after the Holy Nation's attacks to try and hit us, and as soon as the Holy Nation is like gone, they move in. Holy Nation soldiers will still attack roving bandits like any other organized nation would, and sometimes that's to be used to our advantage, like when the Shek are here for their tribute, and we get to find out just what our snack tax gets us as they annihilate a group of bandits that happen to be passing by. This is not one of those situations though. This is a situation where after we stave off the most recent barrage of holy soldiers and the bulk of our defensive forces are in the barracks trying to rest off the wounds they got fighting, the Dust Bandits are taking advantage of the fact that we haven't even had time to repair and close our gates. Like geez, we still got dudes KO'd but stable on the ground outside of the gates, trying not to drown in a puddle of their own blood. But yeah, the mercenaries that we got are trying their best. Those who are still standing between all these endless waves are having their combat stats fly through the roof, but there aren't really many who are able to stick it out in this onslaught. We really gotta do something. Eventually though, we do catch a break. There was a gap in the waves of Holy Nation forces for just long enough to get all the old gates repaired and the new walls built, which bought us enough time and resources to heal up and get ready. You know, it's a little weird at this point. There hasn't been an attack from the Holy Nation in a while, and while I don't necessarily trust it, I know that if we take the fight to them, we'll run across any assault squads making their way towards our base in the process, which is, well, exactly what happens. We shake off most of that patrol though, and hope that they're just a patrol and not an assault force going towards the base to take advantage of our absence. We set up an outpost of mercenary tents and bedrolls to heal in just outside of the sight range of Holy Nation patrols and get to work crippling the Holy Nation. It's slow, cautious work, but we're able to send quick raids to pick off guards at one of the farms on the fringes of the Holy Nation's territory and even free a slave or two. A new friend we made breaking some chains at the Holy Nation farm is in pretty bad shape, so Beep and Burn the Skeleton volunteer to escort him back to New Fullerton so he can get some basic gear and rest up a bit. On the way, we make an amazing discovery. The Holy Nation threw so many resources at trying to attack our base that they left their border city, Stack, severely neglected in defenses, and the Shek Kingdom not only resumed their war on the Holy Nation, but have taken over Stack for themselves. This is huge. This is an enormous win for us, because part of the reason why the Holy Nation was able to hit us so hard so many times in quick succession was because Stack was a very short distance away from New Fullerton. Let me take a second to explain what's going on here under the hood. Kenshi is an extremely dynamic game, especially when it comes to the factions. Essentially, every city can be attacked, taken over by another faction, or fall into ruin if certain parameters are met. For a lot of major cities that belong to the 3 major factions in game, their world state is tied to a specific character. Other things can happen that lead to the city falling into disrepair or significantly decreasing the amount of people defending it, but if a city is to change hands, that person that is tied to the world state needs to be turned into a rival faction for a bounty or outright killed. This is something that's pretty hard to cheese because usually these key characters are not only very deep within their respective settlements and surrounded by people who are going to be very upset if you try to kill or kidnap them, but are also extremely high-level characters themselves. Usually that is the case. It is not, however, for High Inquisitor Seta, the key NPC for the Holy Nation city of Stack. Once you're on hostile terms with the Holy Nation, they'll start sending forces to attack you, which, surprise, surprise, killing the soldiers sent to kill you further deteriorates your reputation with them. Further deterioration leads to more severe attacks on your base, which, when you hit a certain point, you get the big one, which for the Holy Nation is called the Wrath of God. You can skip this event entirely if you attack them first, like say you freed a bunch of slaves or put their paladins into the slave cages. It's just a fun little prank, it's just a prank. But the Wrath of God is a huge raid. Only similar in scale to the Retribution of God event, which happens if you survive the former. Among the insane, huge amount of high-level guys they send, High Inquisitor Seta will be the one leading the invasion on your base. That's valiant, but also a good way to get a harpoon lodged in your skull. Now, if you lose, the Holy Nation will literally take over your base. They'll put you and yours in any cages you have and start using your furniture and even start patrolling like they own the place because, well, they do now. If you win, however, well, it just pisses off the Holy Nation more, but High Inquisitor Seta is most likely dead or captured from the encounter, and since they're taken care of, the Shek Kingdom will move in to take over Stack so long as you haven't done any other work with major factions. Pretty much every major faction has an event like this, and it's kind of a make or break point for if a war with your faction is gonna go well. So we have the upper hand now, at least for a while. We take advantage of this by buying up some property in Stack to serve as a forward operating base that we don't need to worry about guarding since now it's in Shek territory. I divert my trader back to New Fullerton and load up the pack beast with building materials so I can repair the bug house I bought in Stack and fill it with gear storage and beds so that the away team can heal and resupply more easily when we're going after the Holy Nation, which is exactly what we are going to do. We hit one of their mining facilities deeper within Holy Nation territory that isn't so well guarded, and the results speak for themselves. All slaves freed, all guards stuffed in cages to await the patrollers, mining operation completely dismantled. With that big of a setback, we've brought ourselves some more time to go looking for something to give us an edge. We need some serious tech. We need to learn how to make better weapons and armor, and we need to do it fast. Right now, even if they're licking their wounds, the Holy Nation still has the number advantage on us and the skill advantage, because even with the away team, which are seasoned adventurers, now called the Band of the Chonk, being seasoned adventurers from a search for science is not the same as the paladins and inquisitors of the Holy Nation, who are lifelong professional soldiers who outrank most of us stat-wise and blow away all the people living in New Fullerton. The first order of business is to find blueprints, and if we want blueprints for heavy armor and better weapons, we have to head to the United Cities. There's one problem with that though. The most efficient way to get to the United Cities where we can get all those blueprints is the border between the Holy Nation and the United City, and there are swarms of Holy Nation guards that are going to attack us on sight. It takes a lot of save scumming, but we eventually break through the border and get into the UC territory. Once blueprints are taken care of, we have to go to all the most dangerous places in the world to get some serious science. The first and most obvious place we're going to take a look is a place called the Deadlands. The Deadlands is a mostly abandoned area that's home to a large population of skeletons since few other races can safely live there. It's a pretty gloomy place, but I think it might also have to do with the endless acid rain that pours down on it. There's also a secret store in Black Desert City that I was talking about earlier, so we have one guaranteed AI core. Outside of the skeleton store, there's a good number of abandoned outposts and engineering facilities where we get the oh so important engineering research that's vital to unlocking better tiers of building, like things like walls and more advanced buildings, because sure, storm houses and bug houses hold stuff just as well, but the higher tier buildings have stronger doors, which is especially important for gates and the buildings nearby the entrance to our base, especially when you're actively at war with a faction that thinks it's the will of God you should be eradicated. Next, there's an area where while the rain isn't dangerous, the everything else is. There's this big old crater in the south central portion of the continent that's just called the crater. What's in the crater? Science. There's like 4 or 5 ruins in it. You know what else is in the crater? Beak things. Insane, bonkers amounts of beak things. More beak things than you've ever seen or ever wanted to see. Is this like where they invented the beak thing? On the bright side though, we're strong enough to the point where so long as we're careful, beak things aren't much of an issue, and frankly, with all this leather we're collecting from hunting them, we're gonna come out of this expedition pretty rich and pretty well supplied. There's another place right next door to the crater where we can get a ton of science stuff. The complex. The complex is a series of perfectly spherical hills, which within there are a bunch of engineering complexes. There's really not all that much there, but it's kind of spooky. This place is just weird. It also puts you out in a rather inconvenient place in the swamps, so that's kind of annoying, but we've got a pretty good haul. There's one last place where we can get some reliable science, but I think we're gonna have to come back later. Narcos Trap. Ironically, one of the best science spots in the game is deep within Holy Nation territory, and frankly, we're nowhere near ready to hit Narcos Trap. Narcos Trap is guarded by some of the Holy Nation's toughest soldiers who have the entire facility walled off on one side, and on the other side, there's an entire fortress complete with mounted turrets and towers. Oh yeah, and it's close enough to the Deadlands that the acid rain will be an issue, forcing you to choose between if you want protection from the acid rain or protection from the crapload of physical damage you're about to take. This can be something you can use to your advantage, but we're still not ready for that fight. We need some friends. But first, we need to have a proper meal. Welcome to this video's cooking segment. I've saved something extra special for this particular video. A meal fit for Beep, who everyone knows is the strongest warrior. The LOZONGLE. I would say that this is my mom's old recipe, but when I originally got it, I realized that Mama Latan was a little too hardcore for a cooking segment, so I held on to the recipe for a while and modified it to be something a little more doable in a single go. A little more anyway. Like mother, like son, I guess. So I have made a stupidly large recipe. So before we do literally anything else, we want to make sure our pasta is taken care of and ready to go. Before we brown out the sausage, before we grate any cheese, before we even start preheating our oven, because we want to make sure that these are ready to go before we start to assemble. We can't do a whole lot if our building blocks aren't ready, and other parts of this will require that we add things in while they're hot. So salt and boil some water and put a packet of LOZONGLE pasta into the pot. Don't try to get cute and cook it less to be al dente. We want this fully cooked because it'll get its bite back in the oven later on. While it's cooking, get a full sheet pan and some parchment paper. Lightly brush the parchment paper with olive oil, and then once the LOZONGLE is cooked, drain it, start laying the pasta flat on the sheet, and layer. It's okay if you run out of space on the pan, just lightly brush the tops of the LOZONGLE with olive oil and then layer on more pasta at a perpendicular angle. Once it's all done and laid out, set it aside and we do our basic prep. We're gonna wanna get all the lids off our jars, grate all of our solid cheeses, which you want Parmesan, mozzarella, and if you can find it, provolone, into separate bowls. And for some reason, almost nowhere in the Midwest sells like blocks of provolone or even bags of the shredded stuff. If you want it, you usually have to get it mixed in with pizza blend, which I suggest not doing. They do, however, have provolone in bricks at the Hy-Vee, but you gotta pay Hy-Vee prices. For those of you that are not out here in the Midwest, Hy-Vee is kind of like Midwestern Whole Foods. Also, I do not suggest buying pre-grated cheeses for any of this because it's got stuff on it that makes it not melt so good. Plus, it's just cheaper to buy the bricks and grate it yourself. Once the cheese is grated and sorted, make sure you've got the ricotta ready to go, and if you're using fresh spinach, you'll want to wash it and cut it now. I actually don't notice much of a difference between fresh or frozen for the spinach, so if you just want to grab a couple bags from the freezer aisle, no judgment. Alright, time to make some meat sauce. Grab a high-walled saucepan or maybe even a large stock pot, give it a healthy dose of olive oil, and add the ground Italian sausage of your choice into medium-high heat. Personally, I like a mix of 1 part mild to 1 part spicy. Break it up with a wooden spoon or heat-resistant spatula, and once it's been reduced to some nice brown pebbly bits, we're going to reduce heat and add in the other stuff. There's no real optimal order to do this, as everything you put in is gonna get mixed and then reduced a little more. I like to go spinach first, continue stirring until it's all wilty, then add in the marinara sauce, and finally, now that we've got a little meat stew going, I add the ricotta, mixing bit by bit until everything is nice and consistent. It's gonna look a little more pink than it does red, but that's okay because it'll be delicious. Kill the heat, but make sure to keep stirring the meat mix every now and again. Get your casserole dish and maybe a little buddy dish too for the extra stuff that's left over before making sure that you have everything within a short reach of your dishes. Now we're gonna wanna layer this with an extra large portion of meat sauce on the bottom, then a layer of pasta, which if it doesn't fit quite right, just use kitchen shears to cut off the end pieces of one of your LOZONGLE pastas to fit the space, and then your cheese. Charl, I hear you say. Isn't LOZONGLE a mix of red and white sauces? Well, yes, it is, but most white sauces are literally just melted cheese and butter, so we're essentially skipping a step here in the process to make extra ooey gooiness. Now keep layering with a big spoonful of sauce, the pasta, then cheese until you fill up the dish. Don't be stingy now. No one likes a flat LOZONGLE. Also, it's okay if you mess up the order a little here and there. No one's really gonna notice as they're munching down, so long as there's sauce on the bottom and cheese on top. Now, you'll notice that thanks to my absurd over-prepping, I have a good bit of extra left here. I was gonna make this in my roasting dish that I usually have for turkey, but I realized that that would be unrealistic to expect of you, so I'm just gonna take the opportunity to show you what you can do in order to not waste precious meat sauce. The second, smaller casserole dish meant for sides and stuff is just the right size to house all that extra pasta, cheese, and sauce with a little bit of cutting from our kitchen shears. Once your main dish is full, make a little baby lasagna, which you can give to someone in order to increase your friendship points with them. There might be some more meat sauce left over even after this, which you can just put into a container for later because it goes good on pretty much every other carb. Pasta, bread, just eat it with a spoon because you're a hardcore person. The sky's the limit. Okay, it's showtime. Preheat El Horno to 350 degrees of freedom units and cover your dishes with either tinfoil or their lids if they have them. Essentially, everything in this is already cooked per se, but we still want it all to come together for maximum LOZONGLE bungle. Toss them in for 30 minutes, and then after the initial cook time is done, take the cover off, crank it to 425 freedom heat units, and then continue cooking for another 10 to 30. This is gonna crisp up the top layer and make it a little more presentable. And I'm warning you now, if you do go the full 30 minutes, you're gonna need a bread knife to saw through that lambomba. If you don't want any crispiness on top of your lambooble, just cook it covered for a total of 45 minutes at 350 degrees, skipping the uncovering phase entirely. And then when it's done, pull it out, but do not eat it right away. It needs to rest. LOZONGLE needs a good 20 to 30 minutes of resting before being cut into so that it can solidify. Otherwise, it'll just turn into soup when you try to cut into it. Sprinkle some basil leaves on top of it and serve with some garlic bread or some white adult juice because we're just doing carbs on carbs on carbs tonight. If you want to do this vegetarian, or literally all you have to do is just not add the sausage in and maybe some additional spices to offset what was in the sausage. If you want to do this vegan, well, this technically works. Like, you can do this with vegan cheese theoretically, but in my own opinion, vegan cheese is a long way to go before it can really be considered a substitute. Best of luck to you on that one. Now this is a worthy meal for the strongest warrior. We will now feed Beep the great LOZONGLE, and he might be so invigorated to seek new allies for our war against the Holy Nation. But before we resume our war, I'm just going to answer a couple questions for you that you might have. For one, why do I do cooking segments? Well, because I want to. I like cooking. Why do I do them on this channel and not on a separate designated cooking channel, as many of you have asked me to do because you just really like the cooking segments? Well, the technical reason is that unless you're really, really big, it's hard to start a new channel from the ground up, and on top of having a hard time getting monetization of it, I'd lose a lot of you in the conversion. And additionally, I'm just one guy. There's no editors, there's no writers, there's no people to help me with things, and it's very hard running a single YouTube channel by myself, let alone two. The other, and the main reason I do them here, inside of a gaming video of all places, is because I want to get you interested in cooking and show you all that you can do it. We just made some fine lasagna here, which, the way everyone talks about it, you think it's some sort of Herculean task. But no, it isn't. It's just making some sauces, stacking them, and tossing them in the oven. I'll let you in on a little secret too. Outside of a single intro to cooking class I took my senior year of high school, which I took mainly to exploit a scheduling loophole that allowed me to not come on campus until well after lunch, I have no formal culinary training. I just kind of goofed around in the kitchen trying to make stuff I like to eat at restaurants until I figured it out. And that's what I want to do for you. Screw being red pilled, blue pilled, black pilled, or whatever pilled. I want to get you kitchen pilled. I want to show you that anyone can wander into a kitchen, and it's so long as they're willing to accept that it might take a few tries to get a dish right, Anyone can be a damn fine cook in their own home. So if you want, all patrons in the $5 tier or higher get access to the exact recipe we used here and all the others I've done on this channel, but if that's not for you, totally cool. I still suggest that you Google some of your favorite things to eat, read a few recipes, and take a crack at it. Now that I've talked at you all long enough, let's get back to the rise of Cyberbeep. We found a lot of science. We can make a lot of cool stuff. And now our gear is easily better than what even higher ranking Holy Nation soldiers have on them. We could scour the continent and pick up every last recruit that we can find and afford and slap all that high-end gear on them, but we could not possibly hope to take on the Holy Nation like this because recruits found out of a bar have far too low stats for that gear to mean anything, and there aren't enough mercenary companies in the world that we can all hire at once that would let us take down the Holy Nation of our own accord. We've been able to repel all of their attacks and even hit the Holy Nation back a few times in small places like their farms, but we can't make any serious progress on our own. Sure, the city of Stack has fallen, but that was the Shek Kingdom taking an opportunity, not us. But therein lies the solution. We have the tech, but now we need proper allies. First, we need strong soldiers of our own, not just bar boys, but like people you have to go out and find. I hear there's one particularly strong skeleton somewhere in Venge, you know, that desert wasteland where the death laser shoots out from the sky and can instantly eradicate your squad? Yeah, that place. Apparently there's a really strong person there. With a bit of searching, we come across a tower that seems to fit the bill, and we get there and wow, yeah, I can see why this place is called the Tower of Abuse. We fight through several floors of skeletons doing God knows what to those other skeletons until we're at the top floor. We fight a boss who has a few choice words that we just ignore in favor of smacking him around until he falls down, and unfortunately we're a little too late because there aren't very many skeletons left intact. The one who is still alive, however, is completely crazy and only communicates in incoherent screaming. Meet Agnew. Agnew has the single highest starting strength stat in the game, which makes them hit like a truck right off the bat. Sure, their weapon skills are fairly basic and essentially at the default values, but we'll teach them how to hurt people in no time with proper finesse. Agnew also gets along great with Beep, who fancies himself a skeleton now that he's got a prosthetic limb and is calling himself Cyberbeep. Agnew is a great addition to the team and a forever member of the main squad, but we still need like factional allies, you get me? The first real allies that we got were people who were already actively fighting against the Holy Nation. They call themselves the Flotsam Ninjas. Admittedly, they're not doing a very good job at fighting the Holy Nation. The Flotsam Ninjas, who I'm not really sure why they're called that because they're nowhere near an ocean or a large body of water that might have flotsam in it, are acting as an underground railroad of sorts against the Holy Nation. They have exactly one small settlement and a smattering of safe houses meant for runaway slaves from Rebirth. I'm down to help out with that. If anything, I've already helped out with that a ton. Formally allying with the Flotsam Nations is also an action that shows we're going all in this fight against the Holy Nation, because agreeing to be friends with the Flotsam Ninjas automatically gives you -70 to your relationship with the Holy Nation. And I also think it triggers an automatic attack, but we've been having so many dudes thrown at our base lately that if there was an extra attack, I didn't notice. The Flotsam Ninjas are even nice enough to send reinforcements to your base once you're friends with them. However, they take so long to get there that any major assault that was coming at your base from the Holy Nation will be long gone by the time they show up, and when they do get to your base, it's only like 4 or 5 lightly armored dudes, so I guess it's the thought that counts. In the meantime, since the Holy Nation is crippled from botching their Wrath of God event and losing a whole city for it, we can be proactive and deal with lesser threats. Give us some breathing room, you know, because removing an enemy is just as good as gaining an ally. So the Black Dragon Ninjas, who have been a pain in our asses since we first set up shop, are a prime candidate for getting wrecked. They send swarms of dudes to try and steal all of our snacks, but ironically, their base only has a handful of people guarding it. Our long-range specialist, Green, makes a fool out of their turret defenses, and then we just waltz in and mulch pretty much everyone that's in there. I didn't even bother to film turning in the Black Dragon Queen because they went down in such a pathetic fashion. That's one less thorn in our side though, which gives us a bit of breathing room, which we really need if we want to build up our defenses. We still need major allies though, someone who actually has the forces to back us up while we take the fight to the Holy Nation. There's only 2 real choices for that, which are either the United Cities or the Shek Kingdom. The United Cities has a lot of nice stuff in it, but they're basically a slave economy, and I'm not down with that. The Shek Kingdom seems to be the better choice anyway, since while they aren't the most prosperous of nations, they're a warrior culture who's already up for the idea of taking out the Holy Nation. There aren't really any daily grind quests to like get your rep up or anything like that. If you want to get a faction to like you, you gotta go big. And if you want to go big, you gotta go after the Bugmaster. The Bugmaster is one of the legendary characters of Kenshi. I'm not sure if there's an official designation in-game in the value somewhere for that or not, but in this case, legendary means that he's someone that normal NPCs will talk about in bars and on the road as some kind of insanely powerful and enigmatic figure that no one can take out. It probably doesn't help that his lair is surrounded by like the nastiest bug-like things in the game, like by the hundreds. I don't think there's anyone in the world that's even gotten close to his lair in-game. Good thing we're the protagonists. The Bugmaster lives in a place called Arach, or is it Iraq, like arachnid? I'm not sure, I've never heard it said out loud. His faction is literally the spiders. He is the Bugmaster after all, so it makes sense that he's like the king of the spiders or something. Iraq is not a place to be hanging around in. It's got swarms of skin spiders that each have more big nasty bugs in them than some entire regions do. The terrain is hostile, there's effectively nowhere that's safe to camp out. Oh yeah, and the Bugmaster himself is an absolute unit. There's an area surrounding Iraq called Watcher's Rim, where scores of mercenaries and elderly Shek gather to stage their attacks on the Bugmaster. The mercs are in it for the money or the glory, but for the Shek, this is a means to an honorable death. At a certain point, they get too old for military service in the Shek Kingdom, but they still need to die a warrior's death according to their custom. They have an entire city nearby called Kral Stand, named for an old king of the Shek, where they all drink and party before they go out to face death by a million cattle-sized spider things. We stop by and have a nice time, but we also plan to confront the Bugmaster and survive, so we're gonna be a bit more cautious. There isn't really any science or anything worth looting in Iraq. If you're there to confront the Bugmaster. This is essentially a low-grade stealth mission, as you gotta keep your camera all the way zoomed out in order to avoid the traveling swarms, because if you encounter one, you'll be fighting it for long enough for another to show up, and it becomes a losing game, just kinda like the Fogmen, except on a much larger scale. We carefully time our movements to dodge the big patrols and break into the Bugmaster's compound. It's an old lab, like many we've looted for science before. There's a few large skin spiders on the first level inside of the gates, but it's nowhere near as bad as what's going on outside. We take them out and we're in. Surprisingly, we're able to set up a full-blown infirmary on the lowest floor of the Bugmaster's lair. Either this guy is like deaf or just really patient. We're able to set up all of the bedrolls that we brought, and everyone who is injured on the way here is able to have their wounds tended to and then rest for as long as they need until they're fully recovered. You know, come to think of it, we've been here a while. I'm starting to think that the Bugmaster knows we're here. He's just waiting for us. Oh man, this is gonna be rough. The Bugmaster makes a fool of us. We're barely into the fight, and he's single-handedly taken out half the squad. He's not even wearing any armor. He's just got a sword and insane reflexes. We can hardly even connect with the guy for him to block our blows, and he's hardly broken a sweat. Things are looking bad, real bad. But eventually, someone lands a hit on the guy, and then another as he's recoiling, and another, and another. And then, after a very long fight, he finally gets weakened, slowed, and goes down. More than half the squad is now completely incapacitated, and the rest of us are barely standing, but we got him down. While we secure the mother of all bounties and make sure everyone is back in their infirmary beds, because just because we finished the Bugmaster doesn't mean all the bugs are gone, I take a moment to see what's in the Bugmaster's chest and... Hey, what's this? It's a map. It says I already know the location, though. I remember everything now. I know what this is all for, and I know what we have to do. The Holy Nation will fall, but that is merely a step in the plan. This map's description reads, it's a map pointing to a certain location in the Ashlands. It's covered in gibberish writing and pictograms. Though the Bugmaster was obviously insane, he seemed to have lived long and knew a lot of the world's secrets. You can piece together enough scraps of information to understand that the Bugmaster was training himself in preparation to go here and kill someone. It seems to have been his obsession. Whoever is there waiting in the Ashlands, it must be someone insanely dangerous. I know who's waiting out there for me. And he must die. The walk to the capital of the Shek Kingdom is mostly uneventful. We scrap with a few hordes of skin spiders, but since we're on our way out, it's not much of a hassle since they seem to be trying to keep people from coming in. They seem a little demoralized, if anything. We make it to Admag and we're greeted as heroes. Esada the Stone Golem herself, the queen of the Shek Kingdom, meets with us, and now we are recognized not only as a nation, but as an ally to the Shek. We were also supposed to be able to recruit her daughter, Seto, who has a pretty solid stat block, but I think my modified squad size messed with things and the game thought that I already had too many people. With the Shek officially on our side, we have time to rearm. Our factories in New Fullerton have been putting out high quality steel blades that you can't find in any store in the world with armor to match. We have our weapons, we have our allies. It's time for the Crab Arc. We need powerful allies to defeat the Holy Nation and end slavery. And the most powerful allies in this game are the crabs. We make the trek to the southeast corner of the continent where we meet the Craberators, an ancient people who specialize in the art of crab. While there are some trials associated with being accepted by them, that requires you to build a whole base in their territory, and we don't really have time for that. They still let us just buy the crabs though, so that's cool. With all our saved money, we buy ourselves 24 of the finest crab warriors available and give them names like King, Snowball, Spider, Cakes,
Gun,
and Crob. We teach our crabs to march and we're off to New Fullerton to muster our forces and take the fight to the Holy Phoenix himself. There's just one little itty bitty problem though. All of the crabs are already dead. You see, crabs are devastating in the right conditions. They are also extremely fragile by the nature of their design. They have no limit on how big they can get, and they've got AoE attacks like the Iron Spider. But to balance them gameplay-wise, they are the single hungriest unit in the game. As a point of reference, Hivers have a hunger rate of 0.5, humans have a hunger rate of 1 being the baseline, the Shek have a hunger rate of 1.25, which makes them very hungry boys, and crabs have a hunger rate of 2. They literally need twice as much food as a normal human would, and their satiation time is non-existent. I really tried to get them home to New Fullerton intact, but even with sending my trade caravan loaded up with pack animals full to capacity, with food to meet the band of the Chonk halfway, and taking a route that allowed us to strip meat from the gurglers to snack on along the way, but not a single crab was able to make it to New Fullerton before collapsing from starvation, even with me carrying them so that we could move faster. That's another problem, was trying to have a crab army. Crabs are some of the slowest moving units in the game, which when coupled with how fast they get hungry makes them wildly impractical unless you've got them guarding a base, which just so happens to be right next to the crab village you bought them from. Our crabs may have starved to death somewhere in the United Cities, but our will to murderify the Holy Nation is still going strong. This was a test of our fortitude, and while our crabs did not survive, we did. It's time to go kick the crap out of the Holy Nation. We're hitting them somewhere that not only cripples them, but makes a point. We're going to Narco's Trap. As we discussed earlier, Narco's Trap is an insanely well-guarded fortification in the Holy Nation that holds a lot of high-tier science and also a lot of Holy Nation paladins. We came prepared though. We set up camp just outside of the patrol range and take off our armor to don long coats. Between our steel rattan hats, which give us ample head protection plus a bit of acid protection, and the acid protection of long coats, we are completely immune to acid, and we're going to use that to our advantage. We wait for the acid rains to start, and then our plan goes into effect. Our sniper Green starts taking pot shots at the outer guards to get their attention. Not only does this piss off the guard that just got a bolt put through him, but also a few of his friends. This is exactly what we want. Well, we don't have armor. The Holy Nation guards don't have acid protection, and in order to get us, they have to run a long way all the way from their gates to our camp through acid rain, all while green is putting holes in them. By the time they get to us, it doesn't matter if we don't have the armor to protect us because the Holy Nation guards are already halfway dead. By the time we're actually charging their gates, half their forces have fallen for this trap and are out of commission, and the other half are helpless to stop us. We take Narco's trap and loot it for all its sweet, sweet science. Outside of Blister Hill's inner area, this is the single most well-defended area in all of the Holy Nation, and we just crushed it. The Holy Nation is officially on notice, but I want to make sure the Phoenix gets the message. Instead of going straight back home, we detour north to Blister Hill, the capital of the Holy Nation. We take out the gate guards and charge in, completely overwhelming the outer defenses and wreaking havoc on the outer city. There aren't even enough guards left to successfully defend the city from a wandering herd of raptors. We just stand there for a bit and make sure that the Phoenix sees us. We want him to see that we can come for him at any time, and that this war is going to be fought on our terms, as it is now ours to win. On the way back, we also attack the city of Bad Teeth, the other major city the Holy Nation still has, just because we thought that'd be the baller thing to do. We drop off the major NPC in Czech territory, and then we return to home for some well-deserved rest. The Holy Nation's days are officially numbered. Thanks to our efforts, the Holy Nation is now in shambles. They don't have enough forces to attack us anymore, thanks to what little forces they have left being needed to keep the Fogmen back, who saw an opportunity when their defenses against the farms thinned. That's a them problem though. We have a different problem. Slavery exists, and I don't like it. It's a byproduct of an evil empire that, even if it's been dead for a long time, still needs to be confronted and destroyed. To accomplish this, we're gonna need some more allies, and then we're gonna need to show not just the Holy Nation, but the whole damn world that we mean business. It's time to go public. We seek out the secret city known as Spring. It's hidden at the top of a mountain, at the end of a treacherous path, where no Manhunter or Holy Nation Inquisitor dares to go. This is where we will find the base of operations for the Anti-Slavery League. They're a group of dudes and robots who have dedicated their lives to dismantling slavery wherever it might be, and they're good enough at it to where the United Cities are on high alert for anything to do with them showing up on their radar. They're led by a skeleton named Tin Fist. Tin Fist is a truly spectacular skeleton. He's one of the few that was not only around for all of the Second Empire, but also has his memories and abilities still intact from that time. You see, while skeletons themselves are very old, the weight of the ages in their actions during the Second Empire unsurprisingly leads to depression. Conveniently for them, skeletons can factory reset themselves and forget all those pesky memories at no cost. However, they also have to reset their skills, so I guess that is a cost. This is certainly not the case for Tin Fist. Tin Fist is one of the toughest characters in the game and was a student of the guy who invented martial arts. Tin Fist was also a confidant of the Emperor of the Second Empire, and now he lives to right the wrongs during his time at the Emperor's side. We can help with that though, through the power of friendship and extreme violence. It's time to take the fight to everyone who means harm to the free people of Kenshi. Slavers, killers, naughty goats. No evil is safe. Our boys are now seasoned fighters, ready to take on all the bad guys in the world. The continent is a big place, and there's a lot of freedom we need to distribute, along with the good word of Cyberbeep. First on the list is a group of bad dudes who aren't necessarily enslaving people, but are arguably doing something much worse. The Skin Bandits. Unfortunately, the name is literal! The Skin Bandits are a group of deranged skeletons that are kidnapping anything with skin on it to strip it off and make human costumes. The process involves attacking anyone that passes by their territory, kidnapping them, and taking them to their bases where they're stuffed into something called a peeler machine that rips off all their skin to produce leather. Fun fact, since there's no animal husbandry in Kenshi, the peeler machine is the only renewable source of leather in-game outside of waiting for packs of animals to spawn or merchants restocking. The Skin Bandits were fairly surprised when we showed up and ambushed them for a change. While not applicable with all skeletons, certain skeletons, particularly ones that are malfunctioning in one way or another, can be killed the same way an animal or a mechanical spider can, by removing one of the parts once they're down. Now, I have a large collection of burnt out CPU cores and a lot of freedom. We take out a few Skin Bandit satellite bases before moving on to the big one. There's an old watch post from the Second Empire we need to slip past to get into a good spot, but then we're in. This is going to be a delicate stealth mission. We've got to sneak into the main building of the Skin Bandit HQ and take out their boss, a human named Savant. Once he's down, we get a blueprint for a suit of armor made out of human skin And we get the blueprint for the peeler machine. We're gonna come back to that in due time. With the skin boss gone, the skin bandits slowly fall apart. With no way to make their skin suits or maintain their peeler machines, the skin bandits will have their numbers thin as they cannot maintain their skin stealing ways, and soon it will be relatively safe to travel that part of the continent again. If you don't count the Sniper Valley, the Reavers, the crab monsters, and all the other stuff hanging around in the Ashlands. Now let's go do something about all that slavery in the United Cities. It's actually not that hard to find, since the United Cities are so brazen as to mark the places that they trade in people on their map as slave markets, making it very easy for us to get to work. Some of the guys they've got guarding the gates are pretty tough, but now with not only Green, but the Czech sniper known as Headshot on our team, most of the tough dudes are now drowning in a puddle of their own blood before we even walk close to the gates. These get a little formulaic after a while. Pick off the tough guys at the gate, storm the front, wipe the floor with all the guards now that all the tougher guys are out of commission, and then take any surviving guards or nobles that we find and stuff them into the very cages that they were keeping slaves in. Also, make sure all the slaves are out of the cages. Some follow us as we fight through the markets, but unfortunately don't survive the fighting. The bulk of them do make it out though, and a few even decide to join us, but unfortunately they're very low stat characters on a high stat crusade where the only thing more brutal than the lands we're crossing are the fights we're getting into. We lose a few of these recruits right off the bat, but the new recruits who do join up and survive start getting very strong very fast. We're going on the grand tour. We start in the south of UC territory with Eye Socket and the Manhunter base and work our way up north to the coast to take out all the major slave operations, liberating everyone we find as we go. The UC and the main supplier of Not Freedom, the Traders Guild, get very upset at this and start sending their elite manhunters to try and dismantle our base. There aren't very many of them, but they are very, very strong. Unfortunately for them, all the combat acumen in the world doesn't save them from our sophisticated defense grid known as having a door. While we're in the general region, there's another group of dudes doing slavery called the Reavers. The Reavers are a bunch of delusional maniacs running around doing violence, thinking that they can achieve a new world order through this means. Never mind what we're doing. We're just toppling unjust institutions in the name of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is totally a different thing. Their lifestyle of violence has a high casualty rate, so they need to find ways to replenish their numbers. Unfortunately, they don't exactly have the best public image, so they have to kidnap, indoctrinate, and enslave innocent people to their cause. We can't let this happen. Half the time we're toppling Reaver bases, we don't even realize it since their dudes are a little on the weak side for our level and the sheer amount of soldiers we've got marching through UC territory. We eventually happen across their main base and take out Big Man Reaver himself. We take some nice shots, a beep on his throne, and the next thing you know, there are no Reavers harassing the free people of Kenshi. Next on the list is the Southern Hive. Not to be confused with the chill hivers from Vane and in the north of the continent that are happy to trade with you and let you hang out in their little flesh huts. The guys down south are violent and send outriders to beat up dudes and sacrifice people to their king. These dudes mean serious business too. While your average hiver is a skinny little guy who'll lose their limbs to a butter knife, the Southern Hive soldiers are just as tough, if not more tough, than a typical human, and they've got the gear to back it up. These guys and their squadrons nearby their base of operations are an ordeal enough as it is for the Band of the Chonk. They also have hull bases. Sure, some of these are ruins they've taken over, but that means that they've got some solid tech that they salvaged out of the old armor depots. We're getting good at this though, and we know not to mess with the satellite outposts. We're going straight to the stores. First, we gotta deal with the king. You know, hivers do have queens, but I've never heard of a king before, and it's a giant murder bot that aimlessly roams the area surrounding the Southern Hive's fortress, incidentally protecting it. We have to deal with King, which is easier than I expected it to be. King is so large that it's hard for it to properly hit small targets, and so long as someone who has a decent blocking skill holds its attention for the rest of the Band of the Chonk, they can whittle it down to nothing. Unfortunately, it doesn't have an AI core on it, which would have been really nice. Whatever. It's time to storm the Southern Hive. The Royal Guards are tough, and to make matters worse, the patrols spawn from right inside of the Hiver Fortress, just in front of the throne room, meaning that if we don't do this fast, it's going to get very complicated. The Queen is what we're after here. Hivers are all made from a queen that spawns them, who is some kind of cyborg. Definitely a Hiver, but a very old one that's got sort of prosthetics attached to their body, which slide into the strange throne that she sits on. We take her out, no more Southern Hive. The exception to this is the Fogmen, who lost their queen and termed aimless. No one's really sure how they keep their numbers up, but it definitely has something to do with how they take anyone they can deep into the fog. It takes a good amount of effort since patrols keep spawning on top of us, but eventually the queen is down and we find that the loot that they have in their treasure room just sucks. But at least we don't have to worry about the Southern Hive attacking people anymore. Now for one last out-of-the-way group of baddies to take care of. Oh, and if you're wondering why we didn't deal with the cannibals directly, every time we pass through the northern part of the continent, we inadvertently wipe them off the face of the earth. Stat-wise, cannibals are essentially hungry boys, which makes them very, very weak. For now though, we have to take on the crab people in the south. Or more like the southeast or east. The Gurglers live off the southern coast in an abandoned city, and they like to wander out and attack anyone that passes by. We can't have that. Their leader has a Mito grade weapon, which is always nice to have, so that's a bonus. Again, this fight is disappointing. We deal with the inner rooms where the king of the Gurglers is, and there's not a whole lot of issues as it's on to the next one already. Which in this case is a city that was overrun by the evil crabs, who have since taken over the village. We defeat the Mega Crab Empire and have a delicious dinner on the beach before heading back home. It's time to finish off the Holy Nation. This is it. There is nothing standing in our way, and all other minor enemies have been dealt with. The Holy Nation must fall. We roll up to Blister Hill unopposed. Heck, we're even escorted by a Shek patrol, who greets us as honored kin as we approach the battlements. Blister Hill is essentially all that is left of the Holy Nation. We've turned it into the Holy City State, if it's even that. We have no problem storming the outer gates, as we kind of already did that, and they haven't recovered since, and make quick work of the lower part of the city. Headshot and Green take out the turret gunners on the inner gate, and the siege of Blister Hill begins. It's a long, hard fight. We gain ground sometimes, but other times we lose to skirmishes and our soldiers get arrested and thrown into cages that we can't quite get to yet. And all of this is happening while we wrestle for control of the inner wall. Whoever holds those turrets gets to dictate the flow of the fight. It's real hard trying to both hold the wall and get into the police station to get our guys back and then get them back into the fight, or at the very least stabilize their wounds, as the Holy Nation isn't exactly big on tending to the wounds of captured enemies. Never mind getting into their major barracks, the outer guards on the far side of Blister Hill, and never mind the throne room, especially never mind that throne room right now. There is no way we are getting in there for a while. What makes matters worse is that even though we're sieging the city, the beds in the police station still count as own beds for an unfriendly faction, so we're not allowed to use them even though we've essentially taken over this building. Healing is a slow, dangerous process, and progress can be quickly wiped away if some of the skirmishers from the Holy Nation get past the first floor of the police station. We're in the police station now, recovering our guys, but this fight isn't ending anytime soon. But even if the Holy Nation manages to kick us out somehow, it's over for them. Their economy is crippled beyond repair, and we did so much damage to the city that there's no coming back from this. It's essentially just the throne room, the barracks, and the police station if they manage to take that back from us. Everywhere else has been destroyed. The Holy Phoenix is now the king of 3 buildings thanks to us, but without him being taken down, there's still a chance we'll see the Holy Nation rise again. We eventually catch a break in the form of our turret gunners finally recovering and being able to man the battlements on the police station, which, how convenient, there are turrets on the cop shop. Well, I guess convenient for us, those were intended to be shooting at us, but how the tables have turned. Between that and holding the gate, we now have turret coverage over the space between the police station and the throne room. This is a game changer. We can now advance out of the police station, take the barracks, and that gives us enough space to put the few remaining Holy Nation soldiers that are still skirmishing with us into cages where they won't be able to attack us. The Holy Phoenix himself and his personal guard won't come out of the throne room, but that's fine by us for now because it means we can properly rest up for the big fight. We storm the throne room, and we go so hard the game starts lagging from the sheer amount of violence we bring into such a small space. We dethrone the Phoenix, and Beep now sits as the ruler of the Holy Nation. I claim the Holy Phoenix's sword, a Mato grade Paladin's cross. This is a very important thing I'll need later. It's the single most effective weapon against robotic enemies in the entire game, and where we're going to go, we're gonna be up against the toughest mechanical things in all of Kenshi. We drop off the Phoenix over at Asada's place and head home. We know that the last of the Holy Nation will be coming for us, and I'd hate to miss them. These guys hit hard. They managed to break down our gate and fight like people who have nowhere else to go after this. But in the end, all they end up doing is forcing us to dust off the old corpse furnace outside of our walls. We spent some time scouring the remains of the Holy Nation in search of their old blueprints. We need to start manufacturing Paladin's crosses for our army so that we're ready to head into the Ashlands. It ends up taking us looking through all of the old Holy Nation military bases, where we find that the Fogmen have moved in the Holy Nation's absence. Hopefully the Shek and the Flotsam ninjas, who are now in control of the territory, can handle this. With the schematics in hand, I place the work order in New Fullerton so that when the time comes, we're properly armed. With the Holy Nation dealt with and all other enemies at bay, it's time for a transformation. If we want to do the Ashlands, we're going to need to be as strong as we can possibly be. Stronger than human limbs allow us to be. It was no mistake that we went after the Skin Bandits, despite them occupying such a remote area. We needed their peeler machine. I've installed one in the New Fullerton Infirmary, and our workshops have been learning how to produce high-quality combat limbs. It's one thing to lose a limb on the battlefield, but this is a whole new level. This is my idea, so I'll be the one to try it first. I willingly step into the machine designed to strip away all your flesh and skin and let it do its thing. I have everyone working hard to keep me alive while the peeler literally tears off my arms and legs. The moment they're off, I'm pulled out and put into a hospital bed where KLR-class skeleton limbs are installed onto my body. It's a truly horrible process, and I decide that no one has to do this if they don't want to. The only other volunteer we get is Beep. Beep enters the peeler, and the true Cyber Beep emerges. Cyber Beep went from having the weakest limbs a character could possibly have in Kenshi to now sporting the strongest ones in-game. The two of us will be enough. Everyone else can have specialized equipment to help them survive in the Ashlands, or Cyber Beep and I lead the final charge. We rest for one last time while the labs make us some gas masks before it's off to the final confrontation. There's little that can effectively stand in our way now. Even if we don't have the most advanced combat acumen, we have the sheer numbers thanks to all the liberated slaves who decided to join us. The band of a Chonk isn't a squad anymore. We're an army that's ready to go to war with the United Cities, whose aloof nobles live lives of luxury off the suffering of people living in shanties with hardly a crust of bread to their name. It won't even be that much of an issue to take down the United Cities. We need to kill some time anyway while all those gas masks are being made. On the way to hit the city of Port North, we passed through one of the slave camps that we hit earlier on in this adventure. They haven't been able to rebuild it. In fact, thanks to not having their forced labor, they can't even maintain the upkeep of the place, and it's essentially a ruin now. A few wandering patrols try to intercept us on our path north, but it doesn't go well for them. Port North is the first real UC city that we're going after. Their walls are considerably higher than those in the Holy Nation, and they actually have dudes who stay at their post on the guns. Too bad they fall for the old sniper trick though. The Eagle's Cross, the top-end crossbow in the game, is frankly busted in the late game, because once someone has a high enough skill to use it, they can effectively take out most anything from a safe distance, including turret gunners at a high elevation. Green and Headshot open fire on the guards posted at the gate, and the first few to notice us don't even make it all the way to where the rest of us are holding the line. We got lucky here. The United Heroes, a group of what are essentially bandits, wandered too close to the guards in the city and aggroed them, distracting them for long enough to where it didn't matter that a noble and their personal guard also got aggroed by the sharpshooters. We fight the outer guards, the nobles' bodyguards, the slavers, and even a few of those United Heroes that got dragged into the fight just outside of the turret gunner's range. It isn't even a contest. The hardest part of the whole ordeal is looting the downed enemies fast enough to make sure they don't have swords to attack us or bandages to patch themselves up once they come to. Geez, I don't even think the new guys went down during this fight. A few slaves even got inspired by the violence to break free, stripping their old masters of their gear before getting the hell out of Dodge. Green and Headshot take out a few remaining gate guards, and we walk into Port North practically unopposed, following the trail of guards that got sniped into the city proper. Lady Kana herself comes out to greet us, shouting for the guards to arrest us shortly before realizing that she just charged at an invading army with nothing but a noble's clothing and a little itty-bitty knife. Oh, and there are no guards left to back her up. Our pack beast, Mr. Stuff, ends up kicking the crap out of her before one of the senior members of the band puts Kana out of her misery. Turns out the little knife was a Maito weapon though, so it's gonna stay with us. Cyber Beep is now an absolute menace and cleaves his way through the last remaining guard barracks with his new limbs. The few remaining guards can't even run away fast enough to escape the wrath of Cyber Beep, the strongest warrior in all of Kenshi. We break every last chain and open every last cage in Port North before deciding that we need to strike that decisive blow. We're going straight to the United City's capital after this. However, we get a little mixed up and we go to Heng instead of Heft, but that's where we make a discovery. The major cities of the UC are already destroyed. We hit their slave labor camps so hard that their entire economy collapsed. Many buildings have fallen into disrepair or are outright abandoned. There's not even half the amount of guards that we were expecting, and the few that are still around are no match for us. This was a battle that was decided before we even got within a mile of the city. It's more of the same in Stoat and Shobatai as we head south. There's no war to wage here because it was already won when we took the United City's production capabilities out from under them. This is indeed something that can naturally happen in Kenshi, where the world state of cities can not only be tied to certain characters, but the states of smaller tributary settlements around them. If you take out enough farms or material processing facilities, the major cities they supply resources to will be unable to sustain themselves and enter a state of disrepair, with reduced guards and not much going on in the city. I don't even bother to detour back to Heft. Emperor Tengu can live in squalor that so many of his subjects have known nothing other than. It's time we move on to the final challenge. Quick little aside here, you might have noticed some of the clips leading up to this getting laggy. Kenshi is already a pretty big game that's doing a lot of different processes at once, and even with my impressive PC, the game is having a hard time holding itself together thanks to some mods I'm running that are allowing me to surpass certain limitations in the game, like how many people you're allowed to recruit. Not to mention that the band of the Chonk, my main squad, is now larger than the recruit cap of the base game. I took the time to turn down the settings to mitigate this, but I apologize if things are still a little laggy on top of being in potato mode. We stop in spring to see Tin Fist and see how things are going on his end, and we're met with an unfortunate reality. We struck too hard, too fast, and the world as we know it is falling apart. Sure, we liberated the slaves and toppled the holy nations and united cities, but in their absence, the Shek can barely hold Stack and Bad Teeth, while the Flotsam ninjas aren't even capable of fully rebuilding Blister Hill. Any settlement outside of the major cities is now overrun with fogmen, who seem to be multiplying out of control from the sheer amount of corpses that the war left behind. Speaking of the fogmen, they've replaced the Southern Hive entirely, and unlike the Southern Hive who obeyed their queen and stayed within her influence, the aimless fogmen have no directive other than to attack and consume anyone that comes near them. And they're expanding. The tech hunters couldn't possibly hope to protect all the people now in danger, and even with me taking out the rebel leader Flying Bull, the Shek Kingdom is already overextended thanks to this war. There isn't an answer to this. We fought and destroyed evil only for something else to take its place. Sure, we freed the people of Kenshi, but we also put them in massive danger. Even if everyone took up arms now, they're not nearly as well trained as all the city guards we killed off, and I'm not even sure those guards could handle the amount of fogmen and other opportunistic groups that have multiplied in our absence. It would be fine if it was anything else, but the issue with fogmen is they keep multiplying no matter what, and we can't be everywhere at once to stamp them out. You guys saw Mongrel. They've got a crapload of guards and they can just barely keep the fogmen out of their city, most of the time. There's a very real possibility that we have done more harm than good, that perhaps our intentions ended up hurting a lot more people than we helped. It's forcing us to wonder if maybe the reason why nobody tried anything like this before we came along was because at some point they figured out that the bad guys might have been a necessary evil. But fuck it. The world will survive and we'll come out of this in a better, stronger place where everyone is free. And the only thing worse than all the unintended consequences that we're having would be if we just decided to quit right now and go home without finishing the job. There's one place left for us to go. The gas masks are done. We're ready. We take one last rest in New Fullerton and tell the home team there's a very real chance we're not coming back from this adventure. We strike out and plow through the swamps that we were once barely able to wander into once upon a time. It's been a year and a half in world and just over 150 hours of gameplay time. Traveling the world feels different now. Even with heavy armor, our strength is so high that we can run at full speed as we scream across the continent, hardly spending any time in one region or another. We're also completely unopposed. The few hostile factions we left alive don't dare to confront us, and the few among them who do hardly last a minute, and it usually ends with a bunch of limbs being flung into the sky as we cut right through them. We scrap with one of the last remaining groups of skin bandits as we travel southwest until we enter the one place we have not gone yet, the Ashlands. The Ashlands were once the seat of the Second Empire. Now it's mostly ashes. Yeah, that is not snow. That is like destruction. No one knows exactly what happened. At least no one who will talk about it. But now, what was once the seat of the old world tech, as the skeletons tried to salvage the remains of the First Empire for the sake of their creators, is a giant, toxic ruin. There's a reason we needed those masks. The air in the Ashland has roving clouds of toxic fallout that make acid rain look like a mild inconvenience. There are a few relatively safe areas where you won't have to worry about it, but there are a lot of other things you'll need to be keeping an eye out for, like the hordes of enthralled skeletons. Enthralled skeletons, or thralls, are skeletons who have had their heads removed that make them essentially attack drones, except for the fact that these drones are still high-level skeleton warriors. The saving grace here is that because it's been centuries of them endlessly wandering about looking for intruders, their gear is left in a sorry state, and so long as we hit them before they hit us, we'll be fine. The hydraulic knights are the real problem. Hydraulic knights are the skeletons that remained loyal to the Mad Emperor of the Second Empire, so they still have their head on their shoulders. They're stronger, they've got better gear because they literally have their heads about them to maintain it, and only our strongest members can just barely hold them off in single combat. If there's more than one, we're in serious trouble. I want to take a sec here to focus on this fight between a hydraulic knight and I, because it shows why Kenshi is just such a beautiful game. There aren't any sort of combat rolls or anything like that in this game. Your skill with your blade determines what kind of attack animations you are capable of and how fast you do them. Kenshi takes all that information, plus the stats of your weapon, how much gear you're carrying, how much you're encumbered, and pits them against an enemy who it's doing the same thing for. This is as close to a real sword fight in a strategy game as you are going to get. And Kenshi is literally doing this for every last character in combat across the entire in-game world in real time, no matter how many people are fighting in one place. Just look at how beautiful this fight is. It almost looks as if I could control the camera a little better, we'd be in another game's cinematic. Hydraulic knights travel in big packs with lots of thralls at their disposal, but that's not nearly the worst thing that you can encounter in the wastes of the Ashlands. Enter the Cleanser Unit. Remember King from the Southern Hive? Yeah, this is where King comes from. King was one of many, and if anything, he is a much weaker version of the Cleanser Unit. At one point, the Cleanser Units had some sort of flamethrower or gas cannon on them to cleanse something, but thank goodness for the ammo of those things being depleted a long time ago. They're still huge and hit hard enough to insta-kill weak player characters, but we're seasoned, and with enough determination, we can take them down with little incident. Funnily enough, cleanser units are the only renewable source of AI cores in-game, but by the time you're strong enough to consistently farm them, you'll have most likely completed the tech tree and have no use for any of it. They're worth a lot of money though, so that's nice, but then again, also by the time you farm cleanser units, you most likely have more money than you know what to do with. We're not here for the cleanser units though. Through the course of our travels, we've discovered in military ruins and in the personnel storage of faction leaders, maps that lead to domes in the Ashlands. Each of these domes houses the remnants of the Second Empire's elite. Rhinobot, General Jang, the head of agriculture, and General Hat 12. These four were part of the Emperor's inner circle and were complicit in everything that led to the state of the world as it is now. They killed cultists en masse until the Holy Nation was formed. They made mass prisons for children. They led police forces that terrorized more than they protected. And they mismanaged agriculture so poorly that there's a non-zero chance that the cannibals in the northern part of the continent are cannibals because of the famines created by the Second Empire. We storm each of their domes, wipe out their bodyguards, and take their CPUs out so that they can never harm anyone again. This is almost over. There's one last dome to assault in the Ashlands, and it's the hardest by far. Welcome to the place that the Bugmaster's map leads to, Catlan's Exile. Emperor Catlan has surrounded himself with over 100 thralls as he sits on his throne surrounded by nothing but piles of trash in the ruins of his empire. We have to carefully take out all those thralls first. There's a lot of these things, and by the time we're done, it's hard to see the ground with all the oil and scrap that's been strewn about it. I organized a band of the Chonk into ready positions, and then Cyberbeep and I address a few of the original members of the band from way back when we didn't even have a place to call home. Cyberbeep and I are going in there to face whatever monster is in that throne room, and we're not leaving until he's defeated. I have the old guard hold the line as Cyberbeep and I enter the throne room on our own. This is what 150 hours of training, exploring, getting our ass beat, getting back up, and fighting injustice has led to. We are the strongest that we have ever been up until this point, and no one has been able to stand before us. But in spite of all of this, we're still no match for Mad Catlan. Catlan, the Emperor of the Second Empire, has literally perfect 100s in every applicable stat for combat. We're lucky if we can move fast enough to connect with him, and even then, it's just a parry at best, while Catlan hits so hard that even if we manage to block him, we still get staggered and take considerable damage. Cyberbeep and I barely last 30 seconds against Mad Catlon before we're on the ground bleeding what little organic blood we have left in our cybernetically enhanced bodies. The old guard charges to intercept Catlon, but he's inhumanly fast and whizzes right past them. The rest of the band of the Chonk rushes to meet him in a panic, and the next thing we know, Catlon is soloing the entire band of the Chonk. It's not much of a fight. Green and Headshot run out of the way and get into position where they have a clear line of sight on him, whilst everyone else rushes to meet Catlon head on. They all know that they're no match for the Mad Emperor, but even if they can each only last a couple seconds against him, that's a couple seconds for Green and Headshot to put another long bolt into the Mad Emperor. The bridge we're fighting on now has an actual goddamned waterfall of blood streaming down it as everyone waits their turn to try and hold off the Mad Emperor for another few seconds. And it's working. He doesn't even notice the first 2, 3, or even 4 bolts that pierce him, but as we hold out against him, he's starting to slow down. We're literally stepping over the bodies of our companions to fight him, even if for a few seconds, but Catlon is getting worn down. And then finally, after Catlon has so many bolts through him that he's struggling to move his joints properly, a blow from a falling sun blade brings him down. And of course, of all the people it could have been, it was a fucking human that I renamed to Rich Evans that dealt the killing blow. More like Dick the Empire Destroying Boy. I waste no time taking out the CPU core of Catlon, and with that, the Second Empire is finally done for. As Cyberbeep and I stand over the remains of the Emperor to declare victory, something feels wrong. I think of all the death and destruction it took to get here, and wonder if it was really worth it. I think of all the new problems we created trying to solve the status quo, and I wonder if I'm really the one to come back victorious. And then it hits me. Cyberbeep can do it. He's truly the strongest warrior, as he says, and if there was anyone that the world could rally behind, it's him. Agnew will take good care of him, Ruka, Crumblejohn, and Burn will be great advisors to him, and New Fullerton will be the capital of the Third Empire, and Cyberbeep will sit on its throne. The band of the Chonk can beat back the Fogmen, and with the help of the Flotsam Ninjas in the Shek Kingdom, the world will be a safe place for everyone again. We really will make the world a better place. Or perhaps I should say, Cyberbeep and the band of the Chonk will make the world a better place. I've done too much. If I were to return, I'd only bring all the chaos I've caused with me back to the world, and we'd never make progress. I'll stay here, Cyberbeep. You can be the leader of the Third Empire and make the world a better place. I'll sit on this throne and keep watch to make sure that not a single remnant of the Second Empire ever comes back. Maybe one day, long after we're both dead, the world will finally blow away all these ashes and there'll be no trace of what was here. Maybe one day, after centuries roll by, this will be a nice place where nice people make their lives. But for now, Godspeed, Cyberbeep, Emperor of the Third Empire. You restore the world while I remain here as nothing more than an Emperor of Ashes. I hope we never see each other again, old friend. Wow, we finally did it. I want to thank all of you so much for your patience with me, as I know I've been talking about this video for literally years, and I really do hope it was worth the wait. This is actually the single longest script I have ever done by quite a bit, and I hope you enjoyed it. I want to say thank you all so much to all the patrons, because your support really did make this video possible. Each and every one of you were instrumental in making this video happen. You want to know the single craziest thing about this entire adventure that we just went through? This is merely one of the ways you can play Kenshi. This is just the default start in game. There's also doing a solo run, a small squad with no place to call their home, the tour solo start where you begin the game with no limbs, as made popular by Ambiguous Amphibian. There are so many ways to play this game, as there are so many people who play it, and each of them will lead to a unique story, just like this one that you've heard here. I cannot recommend this game enough. Kenshi is the best $30 you might spend on a game ever, and this playthrough alone was over 150 hours, and my total playtime is itty bitty baby stuff compared to what more dedicated fans have gotten out of it. Oh yeah, and by the way, Kenshi 2 is on the way. I gotta be honest, part of the reason why I put off this video for so long before seriously working on it was because I kept thinking that Kenshi 2 was right around the corner, but then, everything happened. I don't know how far along Kenshi 2 is or when it's coming out, but it's gonna be set 1,000 years before Kenshi the First, where you'll be able to live in the Second Empire before everything goes bad, or maybe as it's going bad. The sky's the limit. I wish I had more to tell you outside of a little while ago, Lo-Fi was soliciting for translators for the game as I was writing this, and I believe they're also now looking for a producer, and you can see all sorts of development stuff on their YouTube channel if you're really interested. Oh yeah, and since I know you're itching to know, I'll tell you the mods that I use to support this playthrough since Kenshi has a huge modding scene. It's not only got full Steam Workshop support, but it's also got its own section on Nexus, so however you want to mod it, it's all good. As for me, I used Enhanced Shopping Economy, a must for not only making sure there's stuff to buy, but also that the late game shops can afford the stuff you sell. Compressed textures, which when the game is this huge, it's a must even for big beefy machines like mine. Dialogue expansion, because I want to hear more beep. Dark UI. This one's a little self-explanatory. Reactive World. A mod that expands the world states to include just about anything the base game didn't think of, and also adds world state checkers in each of the neutral bars so that you don't have to scour the earth to see if a vital character is dead or not. It also allows you to make sure that Beep is alive. Nicer maps. Again, self-explanatory. 256 recruitment limit. If you're starting out, you might not need this one, but once you get big, you might want it so that you can really expand your army. This does make the game lag though once you have a bunch of dudes running around. Copper ore drills, because for some reason, they are not in the base game, which only has iron drills. Let's Talk, a mod which allows previously spoken dialogue to be repeated after a certain amount of time, since it's very easy to miss some stuff as you're fast forwarding through long journeys. And finally, and possibly most importantly, sensible spider range, because otherwise, blood spiders are completely broken as described by the mod. Kenshi is a great time. It's one of my favorite games. I also know a lot of it can be really intimidating from the outset, so as a side project, I'm gonna start making some basic tutorials on Kenshi when I have downtime. Nothing too crazy, just enough to where you as a person who wants to play Kenshi can watch them and understand the vital mechanics and the rules for this great world. I don't know when I'm gonna be able to make them or how many I'll make, but you should probably subscribe if you weren't already to see them and you're interested in Kenshi. And that's it. Thank you all so much for joining me on this frankly insane journey through the world of Kenshi. If you like what I do and have the means, I'd like to ask you support the channel over at patreon.com/charlatanwonder. If you can't or won't but still want to help out, that's totally cool. Liking the video actually does help a lot, just as much as leaving a comment does, and that's at no cost to you, but it greatly helps me with fighting the algorithm.